What's up guys, it's Amelia. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna bring it back to the basics. I have recently been getting my friends a little bit more involved in makeup and I'm so freaking pumped for it, but I've realized that they don't really know how to apply makeup, so I thought I would make this video to inform them mostly and to inform anyone else who just wants to get a really basic understanding of the steps it takes to put on a full face of makeup. So yeah, if you guys want to learn how to make up, then just keep watching. So step number one, start off with clean, moisturized skin. It's super important to always put makeup over clean skin. It prepares your skin to have makeup on for a long period of time. So the very first thing you want to start off with is some primer. What a primer basically does is it really just preps the skin to create a really nice, even, smooth base for foundation, which is what you want typically to make your foundation look really, really good. There's a lot of different kinds of primers. There's primers that fill in your pores, make them look a little more blurred, not as big. There's primers that help keep your skin super matte throughout the day. There's primers that keep your skin super glowy throughout the day. It really just depends on your personal preference. Today I'm going to be going in with this First Aid Beauty Ultra Repair Hyaluronic Hydrating Primer, which is safe for sensitive skin. I'm just going to take a little bit like that and mush it in between my fingers. I typically apply primer with my fingers, but you can totally apply it with a brush or a sponge, whatever works for you, you know? So I'm just going to take this and very gently just smooth it onto my skin. For people with larger pores, you really want to focus on like the center of your face because that's typically where people have the most pores. And you always want to be really gentle with your skin. You never want to like really rub a product in. Your skin shouldn't be super red at any point during the application process. Now, there's a couple ways you can do the next couple of steps. First, you can go on foundation and then apply your eye products, or you can apply your eyeshadows and eye products before your foundation, which is my preferred method because you never know how messy your eyeshadows are gonna get. And you're gonna have to like clean them up a little bit afterwards, and you don't wanna like be rubbing off your foundation while you clean up your eye product. I'm gonna start by preparing my lids for some eyeshadow. Now, there are a couple ways you can prep your lids for eyeshadow. One, you can totally leave your eyelids alone, but a lot of people really like creating a nice base for their eyeshadow. This allows the eyeshadow to last a lot longer, come out a lot more pigmented than it would just on your natural eye. And a lot of times your eyes are slightly discolored. I have some veins going on, just overall discoloration. Now you can totally go in with an eye primer. There's like tinted eye primers that really help even out your eyelid color. And then there's eye primers like this Smashbox one. This is the 24-hour photo finish shadow primer. This helps amazingly if you have super oily eyelids like I do. I will put a little bit on my finger and rub it on, and it keeps your eyelids from being oily throughout the day. Now if you have oily eyelids, a lot of times your eyeshadows can crease and get all bunched up and look really weird. So I really like using this, but I also like using the method that I'm going to show you right now, which is pretty standard for a lot of people in the beauty industry. They start off with a concealer. Now concealer is mostly used for evening out your complexion. Sometimes concealer is used for covering acne spots. You can put some concealer on to make the redness kind of go away. A lot of people love using it on their eyes. So just put a little bit on your eyes and it's gonna even out your eyelids so beautifully. You will see in a second. Now I'm just gonna be using a little mini sponge for this. There are concealer brushes. I just personally like using this mini sponge. By the way, if I forget to mention a product that I'm using, I'm gonna list all the products that I'm using down in the description below. This way if you wanna pick up some of my products. And I'm just gonna very gently, always be super gentle around the eyes, but I'm just going to slowly pat it out. You can already see a huge difference. So there's discoloration and darkness right here. That is no longer on this eye. And I typically go all the way up to my brow bone just to make sure the entire area is even. Now, a lot of people really like to brighten the area around their eyes. They'll typically use a lighter shade of concealer, which is what I normally do. Today, I just kind of used them slightly more natural color, but people will typically use like a shade brighter because you really want to brighten up your eye area. It kind of just like brings your focus to the center of the face. Concealer can crease pretty easily, which means it's gonna bunch up and be all bumpy and stuff. We don't want to do that, so we're gonna set our eyes. The best way to set any kind of concealer or foundation is with a powder. This particular one is the Fenty Beauty Pro Filter powder, and it is actually a colored powder. This is in the shade Lavender, very light lavender. It's kind of hard to tell on camera, but there are powders that come in different colors, such as lavender or a yellow color, and those are typically known as brightening powders. So I'm just going to take a little bit of powder right here, and I'm just going to kind of pat this right over the concealer. You can also do this with a brush. That's another way I really like to do it, but since I have more oily eyelids, I tend to use a sponge to make sure I really have a lot of powder on there. So now that my eyes are all prepped, I'm gonna go straight into eyeshadow. I'm going to be using my Tartelette in Bloom eyeshadow palette. I think this is a beautiful eyeshadow palette for beginners because it has a lot of the just natural neutral shades, which I feel like beginners should typically start out with. You're not used to makeup, so anything you put on your face is gonna look a lot more drastic. So starting off with just a very natural eyeshadow palette is gonna get you kind of just used to the basics of makeup. Plus, Tarte's eyeshadows in particular are super easy to build up and they're super blendable, which is perfect for beginners as well. So there's a couple places on your eyes that I'm going to point out, and I just want to show you what those places are. So first, there's going to be the outer corner, typically going to be this area right here, just the very outside portion of your eye. Then there's also, you guessed it, the inner corner. So it's going to be the very inner corner of your eye right here. Then we have our crease, which is basically, I'm gonna squint my eyes so you can see it has like a crease right here in my eye. That is known as the crease. And then we have the lid, which is basically just anywhere on your natural eyelid, which is pretty much usually below the crease. A couple other areas is your lash line, which is the line that basically is right above your natural eyelashes, like all across here. And then you have your lower lash line, which is the area right below your lower lash. Okay, now let's get started with the actual eyeshadow. Now, if you personally haven't prepped your eyes with concealer or put on an eye primer, you're just going all natural, it's best to kind of take a color that's pretty close to your skin tone in the palette. Just take any kind of brush and just make sure you pat it and blend it out all of your eyelid up to your brow bone, just to make sure you have a really nice even base, because if you have a powder base, it's going to make blending your eyeshadows down the road a lot easier. But since I already prepped my eyelids, I'm going to go straight into my crease. A lot of people like to use very neutral colors in their crease because this is kind of just setting the tone for your overall look, and it's also giving a lot of definition to your eye. I'm going to take this Gesture shade right here. It's a little darker than my natural skin tone. I would even say you can go into like a really light pink. And if you're going for a darker look, you could also even go into this darker shade. I'm just going to take this and start applying it in the crease. I'm just taking a fluffy blendable brush, and I'm going to use windshield wiper motions, which is this back and forth motion you see right here. And as you can already see, this side is a little more defined than this eye that I don't have any eyeshadow on. The key to eyeshadow is just to layer. Always start off with a very little bit of product and then just keep building and building until you get to the intensity that you want. Another thing I should probably point out is just dip a very little bit and make sure you tap it on your palette or like give it a little blow. This is just gonna make sure there's not too much eyeshadow on your brush. Because if you load your brush, then it's gonna be a lot harder to blend, and it's really easy to make a mess that way. So this is a definitely more controlled way of applying your eyeshadow. So the next step I really like to do is I like to take a slightly darker color. So I'm gonna go into this Rebel shade right here. Now for brushes, I would say I personally like using just all blending brushes, but there's just so many brushes out there, and I feel like just because it says blending brush doesn't mean you need to use it as a blending brush. Just take a brush that looks like it will get the job done, and over time you'll build up a brush collection and learn what brushes you like, what brushes you don't like, what you like to use for your crease, what you like to use for packing on eyeshadow. I'm going to be listing out all the brushes I use down below as well, just in case you want my exact brushes, but I'm just going to be taking like a slightly flatter blending brush, and I'm going to start very gently patting onto the outer corner of the eye. And then I'm going to use windshield wipers in the crease. So as you can see, this really defined my eye even more. So again, dip back into the shadow, tap off the excess, and do the same thing until you get the intensity that you want. You can also use small circular motions to help blend out the shadows too. Next thing you want to do is dip back into the crease shade that you used and just put it in your crease again. This just really helps make sure that the color you used in your outer corner is nice and blended with the crease shade. Plus you can kind of lose the crease shade as you're going along, so it's always really nice to just kind of bring that color back a little bit. And then today I'm kind of feeling like a slight smoky eye, so I'm going to take an even darker color. I'm going to take this Leader shade right here. You definitely want to focus your darker colors on the outer portion of your eye. That's just like a very natural way a lot of people like to do it, so I'm going to do it like that for you today, but there's so many different kinds of eyeshadow looks you can go for. So I'm just going to very gently pat this on the outer portion of my eye. Always use darker colors very sparingly because it can get messy really quick. And with darker colors, I also just like to tap it on. I don't really like to use circular motions, just like the stippling motion right here. Then again, we're gonna take the same brush and the same shade that we used in the outer corner. Then we're just gonna apply this again in the same spot we did before. This is just to make sure that that really dark color we used is nice and blended. And if you're ever unsure if you blended enough, just blend it more. When in doubt, blend it out. Next, I personally like taking a super fluffy brush, dipping into a slightly lighter color, and I just like going along the brow bone to really make sure the edges are nice and blended into the rest of the face. And sometimes I even go in just to my darker areas and just make sure everything's nice and blended. And then a lot of people like to go into a very light color, so I'm just going to take the lightest color from this palette, and they like to kind of go into their inner corner and just kind of blend outwards. This just really draws attention towards the center of your face. They also like to take the super light color and put it right below their brows. It just kind of helps contour your eyes just a little bit more. Now, before I move on to my lower lash line to kind of balance out the top portion of my eyes, I'm going to be applying some foundation. So when it comes to foundation, there's a lot of different kinds of foundations that are meant for different skin types. If you guys don't know what skin types are, recommend you Google that for sure. But just a really quick rundown on different kinds of foundations. There's usually a coverage amount. So there's sheer, there's medium, and there's full coverage. Basically what that means is how much pigment is going on your face. So if you go for more sheer coverage, you're gonna see a lot of your natural skin showing through. It's gonna even out your redness just a little bit, but you can still see your skin. If you go for a more full coverage, that means you don't want any part of your skin showing. I feel like people who typically gravitate towards full coverage are people with acne, such as myself, because full coverage just really helps cover up just all the redness. Then you have finishes. There's matte finishes. Those foundations typically are for people with super oily skin. It helps control the oils throughout the day. Then you have just a natural finish, and natural finishes are for people who want their foundation just to look like normal skin. And then the dewy and glowy finish is typically for people who want their skin to look like it's just glowing, looks like your face is a little dewy, a little wet. I'd say my skin is kind of looking like that right now. So I'm just going to be taking this foundation right here. This is the Physicians Formula, the Healthy Foundation in the shade LN3. Now just know that it's really hard matching your skin tone with foundation. That just takes trial and error. You know, their shade range is different from other brands' shade ranges, so it's really hard. I say when you're in doubt, go a little lighter. I feel like you can really work with a lighter foundation more than you can with a darker foundation. This one personally comes with a doe foot. There's a lot of different applicators. There's pump bottles, there's pour bottles like this. This just personally comes with this doe foot, so you can directly apply it to your skin. Otherwise, I would say pour a little bit onto the back of your hand or onto like a flat surface, and then you can take your brush or your sponge, dip it in, and then apply it all over your face. But I personally just like applying it directly to the face when I have a doe foot. Now you can apply your foundation 3 ways. You can apply it with your hand, just kind of smoothing it all over the skin. I really don't like to do that. Then there's a sponge. You can take a nice damp beauty sponge and just kind of stipple it. You can also take a foundation brush and then just circular motion, really buff it into the skin. I personally like using a beauty sponge. Just know that brushes typically tend to give fuller coverage, but that really depends like on the foundation formula. But I think sticking to a sponge and just slowly building up is the best route. So I really like starting kind of in the center of my face because I like having the most coverage in the center, and then just going outward. And you really just want to bounce your sponge all over your skin. I personally like to work in sections. This way foundation isn't drying weirdly on any other areas of my face while I'm working on this side. And you want to make sure you bring that down your neck and onto your ear as well, because as I mentioned before, it's kind of hard finding your exact shades. So if you do your ears and go down your neck, it's definitely going to make your foundation look like your actual skin. Be sure to be a little more careful around the eyes, not undoing the work you just did. As you can see here, you can see some bumpiness, some pores. This side, not as much. That's pretty much what foundation does. I would say this particular foundation is medium coverage because you can still see a little bit of my skin showing through. It doesn't cover everything, but I do think this foundation is buildable, and I will show you kind of how to build it up in a second. Now, as you can see, it's not fully going over all of my zits. I personally don't mind it when my zits are a little uncovered, but you could definitely just take some concealer, kind of dot it on there, and then use your sponge to just really gently blend it out. Always make sure that the concealer you're using on your acne is pretty much the same color as your foundation. Okay, and just for the sake of showing you too, even though I'm pretty happy with the coverage I have now, if you want to build your foundation, all you do is just put a little bit more foundation on, and then just very gently blend it into the rest of your skin. This definitely adds a little more coverage to the skin. And again, it really depends on the foundation. Like a sheer coverage, you can build it up a little bit, but it's typically always going to show your skin. Now we want to follow up with some concealer. I really like putting concealer under my under eyes because as you can see, it's a little dark still underneath my eyes. So this would be perfect for more brightening concealer. This concealer is kind of my exact skin tone, but you're just going to take a little bit. I personally like using a mini sponge for this as well. And you're just going to pat it out. And you're going to kind of go in a triangular motion. So you're going to bring it down like this, exactly like a triangle. You know, brings a lot more light to the center of your face. So as you can see, a lot of that darkness disappeared. You can see a lot more darkness on this side than this side. A lot of people also like to put some concealer right here and a little bit down the center of the nose and sometimes on their chin too. I don't like doing it on my chin. Now we need to make sure we set our face. Again, I'm going to use my brightening powder for setting underneath my eyes because I want it to be slightly brighter there. If you really don't care about like brightening those areas, you can totally just use like a normal colored powder. And a lot of people like to bake. Now, personally, I think baking, like, you don't really need it, but I think it can really help if you're struggling with your under eyes creasing throughout the day. So what you're gonna do is you're just gonna load up a sponge or a brush with powder, and you're gonna dab this all over the area where you have your concealer. And you're not gonna like totally dab all the powder off of your face. You're gonna wanna keep some there. And then you leave it there for a couple of minutes. So while that's baking, I typically like to apply powder to the rest of my face. It's really important to set your foundation. This way your foundation stays in place throughout the entire day. It doesn't like move, or if you have oily skin, it gets less oily throughout the day. So I'm personally gonna use a different powder for this. I like using a slightly darker powder for the rest of my face, and I'm gonna go into my Too Faced Peach Perfect one. This actually has a slight peach look to it. There's, again, different colors do different things. I just like the look of this one. I don't actually know what the peach does. I'm just gonna take a different side of my sponge and tap this on. You can totally use like just a super fluffy brush and just kind of like swirl it onto your skin. But since I have oily skin, I like to pat it in to really help control the oiliness throughout the day. Make sure to get your ears and under your neck too. Next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to remove any foundation or powder that you got on your lips. This is just going to help lipsticks and lip glosses apply better later on. So I'm just going to take a cotton pad. So you can totally use a makeup wipe. I personally just use this Filt'r toner and a cotton round. My lips are back to their natural color. Okay, I think it's been long enough for this baking, so you can just take a brush and just wipe it away. Now we're gonna go back into the eyeshadow palette and we're gonna finish up our eyes. So I'm just gonna take like a small brush and I'm gonna dip into like the crease shade I used. I'm just gonna very lightly trace it along my lower lash line. You kind of want to continue it up into the actual shadow. And that's really all you have to do. I personally also like dipping into the dark shade that I used. Very, very little bit and lining the outer half of my eye. Next, I like to move on to eyeliner. Now there's a bunch of different eyeliners. The basic ones are a pencil liner, a gel liner, a liquid liner, and okay, that's pretty much it. I feel like if you use a pencil liner, your look is gonna look softer and it's gonna come off a lot more natural. If you use a gel liner, it's typically more defined, but it's also gonna have a slight softness to it. And if you use a liquid liner, you're going for like edgy, there is no softness to that. It's gonna be very striking. Or there's this method, which I think is really, really, really good for beginners, just because I feel like I have the most control when I use this method. I'm gonna take a really, really thin brush. This is actually called a brow brush, but I'm gonna use it to align my eyes. And all you're gonna need is the same eyeshadow you used. You're gonna take the darkest shade that you used, or you can even take a darker shade if you want. Kind of pack it on there and then make sure to really tap it off. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna go right next to your lash line and just stipple it on a little bit. And you're basically creating an eyeliner from your eyeshadow palette. I think this is also a great way to just save money. Now just know, if it's gonna be a hot, sweaty day, this eyeliner is probably not gonna be the best choice. There's actually like waterproof liners that are a lot better than this, but if it's just like an average day, you're not doing much, this is just a really easy way to do it. I also like to do the same thing and line my lower lash line. Now this is also based on personal preference. I just think the more natural way is to only line the outer half of your lower lash line and line it all the way up to about halfway. and stop. The next step I like to go on to is some contour. Now, contouring is a little more challenging. I'm gonna be digging into this. I feel like if you're new to contour, definitely stick to a powder contour more than like a cream contour. I feel like it's just easier to work with. Now, I really like little palettes like this. This is a Smashbox step-by-step contour palette. It has everything you need to contour your face. So as you can see, there's 3 colors right here. This shade, which is typically the darkest, it definitely has more of a ashy gray hint to it. This is what you're going to use to carve out your cheekbones. So it's really going to define your cheekbones, define your jawline. Then you have this shade right here, which is called bronzer. Bronzer is just to warm up the face. It's really great for people who are super pale because it makes them look like they've actually been out in the sun. Brings color back to your skin that the foundation kind of took away a little bit. And then typically they'll have like a really light shade. This is where you want to put on the high points of your face. But since I already used this brightening powder on the high points of my face, I'm going to skip that for now and I'm just going to focus on these 2 colors right here. So for contour, I like to take a fluffy brush that has a slightly smaller head to it, and I'm just going to dip this in just a very little bit. When you're contouring, especially when you're first starting out, it's really important to not overdo it. So we're just going to slowly build it up, kind of like we did with our eyeshadow. So I'm just going to start in the very outer portion. You can make the fishy face. It doesn't really help me though. You're always gonna wanna go in motions that like are away from your face. This just makes your skin look more like uplifted, which is typically giving you a younger appearance. Just focus on your like actual cheekbone, the high point, and put it like right under that. I'm just gonna do one half of my face so you guys can really see the effect of it. You kind of want to do a 3 shape. So you're gonna go from here to here to here. So just gonna take a little bit up here. You want to stick pretty close to your hairline. This kind of gives the appearance that your forehead is smaller than it actually is. And onto right underneath your jawline. This is going to enhance your jawline. Okay, so I think I'm pretty done. As you can kind of see, this side just looks a little more defined than this side. That's basically what contour does. Yeah, recommend this being another step you really take your time on. Okay, next we're going to be applying a bronzer. I personally like using a slightly fluffier brush for the bronzer, and we're just going to dip this in. It's okay if you load this up a little bit, but like don't go crazy. So for bronzer, we basically kind of want to put it in like a C shape almost. We're just going to lightly apply this slightly on top of the contour, just a little bit. We're also gonna apply it to our temples, and I like to like kind of do outward toward the hairline motions. And we're also going to make sure we put this on our forehead as well. And this side is just starting to look a little warmer than it did before. You could also contour your nose. I'm like not an expert at that though, but you can just take like a little bit from your brush, go along the sides. Keep that very soft though. I also like to put a little bit of bronzer just kind of like that on my nose. I feel like you totally don't have to like use contour. I feel like if you want, you can totally just get away with using bronzer and you're gonna look great. I just think if you want like a more slimmed, defined face, it's really good to use contour. And just to make the look a little more cohesive, I like taking a fluffy brush, dipping into the bronzer, and just kind of putting this in my crease. I just feel like it helps bring the look all together, just in case your eyeshadow look isn't really matching the rest of your face. Since I have a more natural eyeshadow look, I really don't have to do this, but I feel like this just brings a really nice warmth to the eye. Next, I like to dip into blush. There's a lot of different kind of blush finishes. There's a lot of different kind of blush formulas. I think the easiest one, especially if you're a beginner, you should definitely stick to a powder blush. So I'm just gonna dip into this one. I personally really like putting on a lot of blush. I feel like it can totally change a look. So I like to pack it on a little bit more, and I like starting at the temple right here and just very gently stippling it and kind of going onto my cheeks. A general rule of thumb for blush is don't go past halfway to your eye. Like don't go like here, just kind of stick halfway. And then I like to take a little bit on my temple and again, just kind of follow where I put the bronzer almost actually. Blush is typically put on an area where your skin will naturally like flush a little bit. Then I like to put a little bit on my nose as well. I just feel like that's just a really cute look. You don't have to do that. I just personally like to do it. And voila, there is color back to the cheeks. I also like to take a super fluffy brush, dip it into the blush, And again, go into the crease a little bit just to make the look a little more cohesive. Oh my gosh, next is highlight. I love highlight. Highlight's probably one of my favorite things on the planet. There's so many different kinds of highlights. It would take forever for me to actually go through them all. I think a very basic one is just taking a powder highlight. And the best way I like to apply this is with a brush. Now, I personally like more glittery, just in your face kind of highlights, a very intense highlight. You can totally go subtle, make your skin look like it's glowing from within. So I'm just gonna take a highlight brush. I really recommend purchasing a highlight brush for applying highlighter. I think it makes a huge difference, and you're just gonna apply this to the high points of your cheeks so that the area looks just a lot brighter. And you're just going to blend it in. The more you blend it, I feel like the more intense the look can go. I also like to take this on my brow bone and kind of do like a C motion like that. Ooh, so this is before and that's after. Oh, so pretty. And then a lot of people like to take it and put it on the tip of their nose. I like to personally go down my nose a little bit too. And also on their Cupid's bow, which is the area right above your lips. Then a trick I personally love using is taking like a more pointed brush, dipping it in, and I really like going into the inner corner of my eye and very gently applying the highlight. I just feel like it brings like a really pretty sparkle to the eye. I personally have been really like going kind of like in the crease, just a very little bit though, don't go crazy with this. Then to give my eyes even more dimension, I like taking my finger, putting some highlight on the finger, and very gently patting in the very center of my eye. And this just kind of like gives the bam factor to your eye. Next, I like to go into mascara. Now, the simplest thing to do would just be to take your mascara and apply it directly to your lashes. There are a couple things you can do to really change the look. First, you can curl your eyelashes. I know it's super intimidating. It's not as bad as it seems. You just kind of got to be a little careful. All you do is you open it as wide as it goes. Just kind of make sure your like upper lash is in there, and then just very gently and slowly close it on your eyelash and like press. And I don't know if you can see it, but it kind of just curled my lash just a little bit. I typically don't show this on camera because I feel like it's kind of weird. As you can see, like this eyelash kind of droops a little bit, whereas this is a little more lifted now. And you typically want to make sure like you're not doing this like at a slight angle. Make sure you're doing it like all the way in the front. I find that really makes a big difference. And then again, you can also go straight into mascara, but I personally like doing a lash primer. I feel like lash primers really help make the mascara last a lot longer and help them from flaking, which is basically when little flakes of like black will kind of fall onto your under eye area. Now there's a bunch of mascaras that like stay on really well. I just like doing this extra step. Next, I'm gonna go into my little sample mascara that I got recently that I've been loving. It's from Laura Mercier. It's the Caviar Volume Mascara. Now there's mascara that come with all different brush wands, some with bristles, some with just like a silicone to it. So you start at the very lower part of your lashes, like the part that's like closest to your eye. Be very careful. And then you slowly want to do like side to side motions, slowly going up. And that's going to give the most even coat on your lashes. I think it's a lot easier if you try and blink while you're doing it. And this part, you again want to be really careful. Anything you're doing right close to your eye, make sure to take a little extra time to do it. If you're like rushing, you can't apply eyeshadow. I think mascara is definitely a go-to product because it just really defines your eyes, makes you look really put together. And there we go. Now our lashes look nice and full and volumized. You can also put on fake eyelashes. I feel like you'd put them on at this current point. I'm not going to do that because I feel like that's really not a basic makeup step. Next, we're going to work on our brows right here. Now, a lot of people like to fill in and define their brows. So I'm just taking a brow pencil. There's a lot of different kind of brow products out there. There's brow gels, pomades, there's like powder ones. I personally think pencil is the easiest. I'm going to use the Anastasia Brow Wiz. I'm just going to kind of show you what it can do. It kind of really depends what kind of look you want to go for. I feel like everyone kind of does their brows differently. So I'm just going to show you a very general basic way I do mine. So I just start right underneath my brows right here because I feel like here, like as you can see, it's a little sparse. So I like to kind of draw a line at the bottom of them and then very slowly kind of draw upward lines. So as you can see before, after, it really helped fill it in. And then I like to make this mean face like this. And I like to kind of just very slowly and lightly, just a very light hand, and draw a line kind of on the upper part of my brows. And I continue that all the way to the very tail end of my brow. Then I draw very small lines like in my actual brow just to fill the brow in a little bit because I feel like my brows can be a little sparse. So the outlining of the brow was just to really define the brow, and then just drawing and filling in was to make my eyebrow look fuller. Unfortunately, not every eyebrow is shaped the same, so you're gonna have to really figure out what you like, what style you like. Don't be afraid to experiment with the different kinds of brow products. I think a lot of them are really fun and they each do something really different. And I like to use the spoolie, make sure everything's just nice and blended. So as you can see, before, after. This brow looks a lot more defined and a lot fuller. And then if you have super unruly brows like myself, meaning like your brows will like kind of like go in weird directions, I really like keeping my brows in place all day with a clear brow gel. This one is from ColourPop, and all you're gonna do is you're gonna gently brush your brows outward and upward. And then I like to kind of go over the top just so none of them are sticking out. And I'd say honestly be a little careful with brow gels. Don't apply too much because it can make your brows look like really like greasy. And last but not least, we have our lips. There's so many different products you can use on your lips. Since I'm going for a more natural look, I like to use a more natural subtle lip product. So today I'm going to be dipping into the Seraphine Botanicals Juice and Berry Lip Gloss. I think lip glosses are perfect for beginners. Some have like a slight color to them. This has like some fun glittery sparkles, and since I have a pretty basic eye look, I personally want to amp up my lips a little bit and put on some sparkle. Rub your lips together. This tastes so amazing, by the way. It added just a very slight tint to my lips. It also added a nice little glitter effect to my lips. Okay, now I'm gonna kind of make sure that all my makeup stays in place all day. I personally like doing this two-step process. You don't have to do this. I just think it really helps. So the first step I'm going to do is use this Smashbox primer water. Now you're thinking, oh my gosh, primer, that should be the first step. This spray in particular you can use after all of your makeup is done to make you just look a little more refreshed. You can totally use this throughout the day. I personally like doing it right after I do my makeup because I feel like it helps my foundation even look more natural and skin-like. Plus it feels really, really good. So I'm just gonna let that dry down for a second. I feel like it gives like a really nice, just soft glow to the skin too. Then I like to go in with a setting spray. This is the very last step that you should be using. If you don't wanna use this, I highly recommend using this at least. This is the Urban Decay All Nighter setting spray. I think this is like pretty much one of the best setting sprays out there, and it's gonna keep your makeup in place all day. Plus it smells so freaking good, like so good. Then just let your face dry down a little bit. And that is it. That is the very basics of makeup. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give this video a big thumbs up. It really, really does help support my channel. And question of the day, what makeup are you most afraid to try? Are you afraid to contour? Are you afraid of like super glittery eyeshadows? Like, let me know what is something you're really intimidated by. And let's have about others down below who are commenting this and telling them tips and tricks that they can use to like become a little less scared of those products. I am still a little hesitant about cream contours, not gonna lie, those kind of scare me. Also, if you're new to my channel, hi. I'm Emelia. If you guys want to see more beauty tutorials and reviews and just fun videos like this, please subscribe to my channel by hitting the red subscribe button that is right down below. And be sure to hit the little notification bell that is right next to the subscribe button. This way you guys will get notified every Tuesday and Friday when I upload a brand new video. I hope you guys have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will see you next time.